Welcome to Touch Technology Review as the end of year approaches, and what can I say, what a crazy year it has been. I hope that you're able to enjoy the festive season and that 2021 brings you the greatness that you truly deserve. For those of you who are impacted by the events of 2020, you're not alone. I think most of the world was affected in one way or another, from lockdowns to job losses and missed opportunities. Here in Melbourne, we suffered immensely with one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, and so many businesses are still doing it tough as a result. But the one positive thing out of this has been the strength of our online communities, the sharing of knowledge, ideas, and support we can offer each other globally is more important during these times than ever before. I'm so pleased to have been able to be a part of this YouTube community, sharing my knowledge with all of you, and in return to have been given so much support via your comments and likes and all the new subscribers to the channel. One of the videos I created earlier in the year was a simple subscribe animation that you can use on your own videos, and given the success of that video, I thought I'd create a new updated one for those of you wanting a little more. This animation includes the like and share prompts just before the subscribe animation kicks in. So if you want to get access to this animation, I'll leave a link to the free download in the description box below. It's yours to use free of charge without any credit in your videos here on YouTube or any other social media platform. Now, in order to use this animation, simply drag it into your video editor of choice, drag it into the position on the timeline that you want the animation to appear, and then export your project out. If you don't know how to do this and you have a Mac, I would highly recommend iMovie, and you can simply drag the transparent version of the movie onto the timeline and you shouldn't have any problem. If you're confined to an iOS device, you can use the iOS version of iMovie, and that one requires the use of the green screen version of the animation, and you can knock out the green layer using the green screen effect, which I've demonstrated in previous videos, and I'll leave a link to those in the description box below. Now, for those of you up for a challenge and wanting to learn how to do it yourself and further customize the animation, stick around and I'll take you through a step-by-step guide as to how I made the animation using some effects and basic keyframing in DaVinci Resolve. I've already created the graphic elements, so if you're going to continue with the tutorial, there's a link to the media assets below, which you can use freely in your own project. So I've got the latest version of DaVinci Resolve open, and the first thing you need to do is to create a new project. Once you've done that, click on File, go into Project Settings, and then choose the appropriate resolution, whether you want to be working in 1080p or in 4K resolution. I'll click on Save, and now I'm ready to import my media. To do that, I'm going to click on the media icon, which is the first one on the bottom of the screen. And you can see there are no clips in the media pool. I can just right click in that section and import media. I can also import by going to the File menu, Import and Media, or I can drag them in directly from the desktop. So here are the assets I would like to add to my project. They've already been created. I used Affinity in order to create these media assets. And if you do want to use these for your own project, I have put them together in the download folder. So make sure you've gone over to that link in the description of the YouTube video to get access to these media assets. So now that I've got all the assets in my project, I'm going to click onto the edit window, and we are now going to be in the edit section of the project. I'll click on the media pool tab on the left-hand corner so I can see all of my media assets, and that makes it easy for me to drag them in. I'm now going to select the first layer to incorporate in the project, which is called white, and that's for the white background that you saw in the animation that will slide up and reveal all of the elements. And then I'm going to layer up all of the individual elements that make up the animation. So the first one was like, and I've got a graphic called like PNG. I'll drag that onto the timeline, and I'll drag that along so that it occupies the full timeline. Now I'll add the share icon above that. Then the subscribe graphic. And finally, the bell graphic on top of that. And the final graphic element is the arrow icon, which we'll be animating first. So now that we have our basic layout in place, the first thing I want to do is change the opacity of all of the graphic elements sitting on the white box so that when we click on each button, we've got somewhere to go in terms of highlighting each element. So we'll start with the like icon. On the right-hand side, you'll see there is an opacity slider under the composite section, and we're going to drop that back to around 50%. We'll do the same for the share layer. Drop that back to 50%. Subscribe will stay as it is, and the bell will also drop down to 50%. Now that we've done that, we're ready to start the first stage of the animation, and that is to move the arrow icon along to the like, the share, subscribe, and then the bell animation. So to do that, we're going to click on the arrow layer, and we're going to create a keyframe on frame 1 by clicking in the transform section on the XY keyframe. Then we're going to move the marker on the timeline along to about 3 seconds. Create another keyframe, and then we'll move it along another 3 seconds and create another keyframe. And now we're going to change the position along the x-axis so that it lines up with the like icon. Go back to the beginning of the timeline, tap on the play button to preview it, and that's looking about right. The only thing is it's noticeably slow. So I'm now going to click on the keyframe expansion on the right-hand side here. And that gives me the opportunity to move the keyframes left and right to slow them down or speed them up. Let's have a look at it now. Still a little bit too slow, a bit closer together. That's about right now. I'll just expand the timeline out a little bit so we can see it better. Move it in. That's much better. I'll create another keyframe here. And now we'll just move the arrow along the x-axis. Move the playhead along the timeline to the next point, create another keyframe, and we'll now move the X position along further. Move it along the timeline a little bit more, create one more keyframe, move the marker again, and finally, we'll move the mouse along to the notification bell. And for the final movement, we'll just move the mouse away from the notification bell, and this time we'll move it down vertically. That's our basic animation. If you like, you can just move those keyframes left and right in order to adjust the speed of your animation, and that should be pretty much it. If you'd like to get a smoother transition, you can open up the keyframe editor and you can right click on the points and change from ease in to ease out for a slightly smoother animation. But that's pretty much the basis of our animation. What we need to do now is to highlight each button as we move along and also change the wording from like to liked and subscribe to subscribed. And I've already created the graphics for that in advance. We just need to place them in at the right point on the timeline. So let's start with the like animation. We're going to move along the timeline to the exact keyframe where the mouse hits the like icon, and we're going to use the cut tool, and we are going to cut the like graphic, and we're going to delete the second part. We're going to substitute that for the liked graphic, drag that so that it reaches the end of the timeline. And if we go back to just before that point, as you can see, when the mouse hits the like button, it turns into liked. And now with the share icon, I'm just going to make a cut at the point that the mouse cursor hits it on the timeline. And then I'm going to change the opacity of the clip that I just cut to 100% so that when the mouse cursor visually hits the share button, it becomes highlighted. Now we're going to move all the way across to the subscribe button where the mouse hits the middle of the button. We're going to cut the subscribe button in the layer at that point, delete the second part, and we're going to drag the subscribed graphic into that position. We'll play back just before and it switches over to subscribed. And finally, the notification bell, we're going to go to the point where the mouse hits the notification bell. We're going to delete that second part and we're going to make this flash on and off a few times. So we're going to create another cut in the bell highlight graphic, delete it and drag the original bell back in. But this time we want to go back to 100% opacity. And now we're going to get this animated effect. And we're going to select those clips, hold down the Option key, and move them along the timeline. And now we have the animation of that highlight going on, but it's a little bit too slow. So I'm just going to adjust the length of each of one of those clips, make them a bit shorter. Now, before we conclude the animation, we need to turn it into its own clip so that we can use it within other videos in the project, and we can export it out with a transparent layer behind it or with a green screen background so that we can knock it out easily using our video editor. So the files that I've created include both versions, the one with the transparent background that you should be able to use in most desktop video editors. But for those of you using mobile apps such as iMovie on iOS, you might need to use the green screen version and then the green screen keyer in order to place the subscribe animation over your video clip. And I've created a video on how you can do that in the previous version of my subscribe button, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description box below if you need to learn how to do that. But to continue with the final part of the animation, we're going to take a look at how to nest a timeline within another timeline so that this timeline that we just created can be placed anywhere on our main project timeline. So I'm just going to rename this timeline to animation. And I'm going to go to File, New Timeline, and create our main timeline into which we're going to drag this animation. So for example, if you were to use this in a project, I would find the point at which I want the animation to appear on my timeline, drag the marker to that point, and then I would grab my animation timeline and drag it on top. So now, as you can see, we have the animation graphic appear right there at the point that I want it to be in the timeline, but it's a little bit too large. So all I need to do is tap on the video tab on the right-hand side, scale it down to the right size, and then adjust the Y parameter and drag it down to the lower third section of the screen. And as you can see, it just pops in, which is a little bit dull. So what I want to do is have it slide up and then slide back down. So we're going to apply a transition effect to the animation timeline to do that. And we're going to use the push video transition, which you can find in the effects library under video transitions. Drag it onto the beginning of the clip and the end. Now the animation will push into the screen or slide in from left to right and slide out again. Now, instead of going left and right, I'm going to change the direction to up down. So in order to do that, tap on the transition effect, which is represented by a kind of semi-transparent panel on the timeline, and then go into the transition preset on the right-hand side and change it from push left to push up. And then for the out transition, we're going to push that one down. And now you'll see the panel will slide up into the lower third section of the screen and then slide back down again. And we can change the speed of that animation by adjusting the handles of the video transition. So I'm just going to make that a little bit slower by dragging them in and out. And finally, to accompany those animations, I'm just going to add a whoosh sound on each transition by dragging them into position on the timeline. And we've now completed the animation. So you can continue to use that timeline in your projects. And what I tend to do for simplicity's sake is to export the animation out as its own self-contained movie so that I can drag it into any video editor of choice. So when it comes to exporting it out, we're going to go back to our animation timeline and we are going to go into the Fusion tab and we're going to click on the background icon and we're going to make sure that it has a 0 alpha transparency, so that when we export it out, we have a transparent layer behind the graphic element rather than the black screen. Or as I mentioned earlier, if you are going to be using the animation in video editors that don't support transparent layers, we can put a green screen background behind it. So to do that, we're going to create a new layer, lift all of the layers that we just created up by one, and now we're going to add a solid color, which we can create in the effects library in the generators section and drag it onto the timeline. Click on it, and then we'll change the color from black, which will be the default, to green. And we now have the same animation on a green screen layer, so that when we export our file, we now have a more versatile clip that can be used in any video editor that supports green screen keying. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, as always, feel free to hit me up with a like and consider subscribing to the channel. And don't forget to hit that notification bell so that you're notified of up and coming video releases. See you on the next one. Bye for now.